All right. Well, I know we're running low on time, but I'd love to open it up to some questions from the audience. Does anybody have questions for our panelists today?
So I can't help myself. I was thinking about what you guys were talking about, and I know you guys embarked on this a little bit. I'm looking forward to figuring out when you said fertilizer. Well, we're feeding the chickens hemp. You know, that's some pretty good chicken shit.
Hemp loves chicken litter.
I mean,
Hemp loves chicken litter.
that's what I'm saying.
Yes,
So I
sir.
feel like that would be, you know, when you talked about double and triple dipping, I feel like that's the way to go. You know, the chickens are going to be healthier, the eggs are going to be good, shit's going to be great. You know what I mean? So, that's the way to.
Right.
That's the way we should be doing like that. I feel like with the Hemp Feed Coalition, that like make sure that that's like if I'm gonna go talk to them now. I'm sure they can't stop me, but I'm gonna go. You know, I think that if they're not approaching it from a Circle of Life program, that would be the way.
It's an excellent idea. You should go ahead and copyright that slogan, by the way. It's going to be great.
No problem.
I do that on my farm. Like everything I use on my farm. It's not the funnest material to work with, and transporting it would be a pretty big pain, biologically as well as like physically. But I mean, it works. I mean, animal husbandry and like animal rotation, like you're saying, if you've got the whole holistic approach to your farm, you know, that's apple of everybody's eye. Not everybody's, but that's a really nice thing to aspire to. But it's not, every farm isn't like that.
Not everybody wants to have
You don't
cows.
want to have that. Yeah, exactly.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
Back
Okay,
and
Anna?
then
Yeah, and I don't know whoever wants to answer this question, but it's really twofold. One, are you seeing, and maybe this is for Bert, I don't know, but you know, when you look at hemp grain, are you seeing or hearing of, when you look at, think of companies like Costco or Jewel or even Walmart, and a lot of those companies have their own product line, their own brand that they sell in their stores. Do you envision, or maybe they're already looking, I'm sure they're looking and paying attention to this, but growing this themselves and putting it, adding it to their own product line, maybe partnering with farmers, contract crop, or just doing it themselves.
Wow.
And if they do that, then would you guys see that being, what's the word I'm gonna use? You see that kind of accelerating regulation. In my mind, when I see it, if a Costco or a Walmart decide, hey, we're gonna try this and start doing it. If I'm the government, I'm like, I want to pay attention to what Walmart or Costco's doing. So just curious if you're hearing stuff like that, or
That's a better question. That's a better question for Bill Gates. Probably buying all this farmland. Probably bought some around here too. You know, it's a catch-22 because when it hits Costco and Walmart, man, you better have it dialed in because they control the market and they're going to want the cheapest they can get it. The quality is important. You know, we went to Washington, D.C. for a team meeting, and we went to Trader Joe's. I thought my partner from the Czech Republic would be very happy at Trader Joe's. She was good until we got to the hemp seed. And she held it up to me. She said, look at this. I guess we can cuss, we already have. She said, this is shit. She's talking about those hemp parts, and she pointed out to me, you know, the discoloration and some of it was not consistent. It wasn't pure white. She said, this is rancid hemp. You Americans are using rancid hemp. So, you know, the quality, the standards are going to be important for any of those players to get in the game. But I don't envision them getting into any type of ag system. They know better. They're much better off to pinch us and make us gamble. And insurance has got a lot of work to do. I really appreciate you being here. But I was presented with numbers from my insurance agent in North Carolina, and I was just flabbergasted that the system is going to have to get incorporated in the system. It's kind of like egg chicken. You're going to have to grow it. You're going to have to get yields that are realistic, and then enough volume, enough farmers for them to take it serious. Right now, it's hard. They're in a bad position unless we get some type of federal help with it. Juice is not worth the squeeze from their standpoint. So right now, that's kind of an issue for the scale. But you said it. We have to have the bigs. A lot of people don't want to hear that. When I first got started, they thought this was going to be a a small return to the small farm opportunity. And that does exist, don't get me wrong. But for it to scale and for it to change things and change the environment, the ecosystem, you've got to have the big corporations jump all over it. And thankfully, again, no politics, check those at the door. But this has been a hemp-friendly administration, and only because they believe in carbon farming, which we didn't talk about much. But hemp is one of the best carbon sinks. If you believe in that science, I'll give you somebody an out. If you believe in that science, because of the volume of plants, 1 million per acre, and the amount of biomass that they create in 1 year's time, it's getting all the attention in the world right now for it being a solution for carbon sequestration. So I think those guys got tricks figured out where they can buy 3 acres of dry land so they can go and trash some wetlands. The same thing exists with carbon farming and practices. They've got incentives which likely will trickle down to the farm. There could be a time where we see incentives to grow hemp. And there's already, like I said, there's a friendly administration right now who wants to see that happen. So
I guess one of my biggest fears is, I think the largest dairy farm in the States is owned by China, by a Chinese company.
yeah,
And that's my biggest fear is when they come in and they start doing this on a big scale and it's owned by China versus a U.S. farmer or a U.S. company.
they own our pork. They call it Smithfield. I don't trust the bacon anymore. Yeah, I'm with you. It's a bad day when China gets in our food system, our supply chain. Yeah, but they're here. And we count on them to buy soybeans, thankfully. Thankfully, Biden and Xi or shook hands.
Andrew was first, then we'll go back.
Yeah, I mean, just general as a farmer. If I was a farmer, and I was interested, I'd kind of be making the decision whether I want to be a pioneer, if I want to hold back and just kind of watch everybody kind of evolve the industry and wait for the right time to jump in. What's, outside of a lot of the benefits that you've already mentioned here today, what's the biggest benefits that you can see getting involved in the industry of fiber and grain production now versus, a couple of years, 5, 10 years down the road when things are a little bit more refined? What's the biggest benefits about being part of this movement and being a pioneer, and what's the benefits that they can see?
That's a good question.
Good one for
I guess that's why I joked and said clout earlier, like being a pioneer, you get the benefit. Like, why do I grow hemp personally? Knowing, I use it on my own farm. Like, for me, that's what hemp is about. Like, I can eat it, I can build with it, I can make clothing from it on my own farm. I can not contribute to the degradation of the Mississippi River, et cetera, with hemp on my farm. I think for me, though, like even looking back to doing research with the universities this year, is being on the ground floor, like knowing that when the big contracts come, I know how to grow hemp. And there's going to be a lot of people who are scrambling, trying to learn how to grow hemp, who are doing their trial and error, who are messing up. And, you might fumble, you might drop the ball. But those of us that have been growing hemp for a couple years, at least even 1 season or 2 seasons is super valuable. Like he said, you don't just throw these seeds. That's like a lie that you just throw these seeds and they grow anywhere. Like, no, you stress out over this plant just like you do any other crop that you put in the ground. So I would say the biggest thing is having that super valuable experience and the network. Like the folks that are in hemp we have all different backgrounds, so diverse. Getting in on that network at the ground floor, I think is super valuable.
So becoming a subject matter expert at this time is going to be very beneficial and lucrative from a financial perspective here when things do turn, because I think a lot of us believe that it's not if, it's a when type of situation. And, there's maybe other opportunities to, maybe invest in equipment and helps us, then move forward while get a financial benefit off the top of it. Great.
You'd rather learn on a small scale than a large scale. In farming, especially with no insurance, and that's speaking with the buyer here and the growers here, you'd much rather get your feet wet on a smaller crop, figure out what's different. You've got people that are going to share as much as they can, but until you're out there, and Jarett and I had a little conversation before this meeting, and you don't want to scare people off, but I'll kind of give a nod to the farmers. Cause I farm, so I can talk junk to farmers if I want to. Cause you know, they can't say, well, look at that guy who was talking about, like, I farm, so I know the game. I know it way too good. By the way, our average in North Carolina is 110 bushels a quart. In case you're wondering, 110 is the state average. 38 is the soybean average. So you know, everywhere is different. Every you know, I've heard a couple, 4,000 acre farmers. You know, the scale is everything. But yeah, basically going back to that simple point, if you had a way, even because I know what it's like to farm thousands of acres and then try to work in 5 or 10 acres just to try it out. You'd almost prefer to have, if you had a good group of farmers that work together, it might be a good idea to consolidate that growth. And this is Jarett's game, so to speak, his show. And I understand the 20 acre mark, and there's a certain level that you have to have for a contract. But I would almost encourage the group. We the first year out, we had 5 different growers, and they said, hey, just put it on your farm. We'll all pitch in together to share the risk. So if it is a flop, it's not going to take such a big toll on our bottom line. So there's some creativity. If you got a good neighborhood, people that don't mind working together a little bit.
You suggest you talk a lot about kind of working together in co-ops or, you know, things like that. Do you think that would probably be the best move for,
Well,
you know, different people to band together at this point?
Man, I tell you, co-ops can be the best thing in the world or the worst thing in the world. We had 110 farmers. At our peak, it was 110 farmers. And farmers are very independent people. And basically it went really good when things were good, but when it went bad, it was a difficult spot to be in. And yeah, I kind of lied under oath. I didn't mean to. I didn't know anything about CBD. You know, so when I gave my whatever presentation to the North Carolina legislature, when I said that you couldn't grow marijuana in industrial hemp fields, I didn't know anything about clones. I didn't know anything about all females. And so that was a bald-faced lie. We've been saying rope, not dope for, 10 months. And lo and behold, you certainly can grow marijuana in the middle of a CBD field. But that's because I didn't know. And so it's to further that point, you really need to get a couple of experiences under your belt. And there are tools. I can tell you now, if you got corn earworms, which you probably do in corn country, they know all about hemp. Doesn't matter if it was grown 80 years ago or not. They found it. And I had a big disagreement with somebody very smart. And he was telling me that they wouldn't eat it. And I was like, oh, they ate it. I'm sorry. Like, I was out there. They definitely ate it.
So we'll go on to another question. I'm just going to kind of cruise through. I think there were a couple more hands.
I was just gonna apologize to let you know that it went into our main website. It is 20 acres for fiber. But just to add on to that too is kind of like what we were talking about is with the APH, you can build that with your own individual policy. The more that you put information into the local county level, the more that, because when you dive into the yields that they kind of spread across this area, they don't match necessarily what you're capable of producing. Yeah, so it's your actual production history. So after you grow in, you put that production in, eventually your production history will match what you're capable of growing year to year. So as you continue to put that production in year to year, it'll take away from the county average. And eventually, after 10 years, you'll have your own production. You won't be pulling off of the county average that's lower than what you're capable of growing. And on top of that, he kind of mentioned about the pigs. It's not necessarily corporate America coming in and farming. There's a lot of farmers. Farm Bureau just talked about 90% of the farmers in Illinois are family owned and operated. There's still plenty of family farms in the area that you need to talk to about it and dive into them about. There's plenty of 1,300 acre growers all across northern Illinois, central, southern that they just may not know about it yet. I'll piggyback right back on what you're saying. I didn't follow through with what Jarett and I were talking about. It was how much to share
with farmers. We didn't want to scare anybody. You don't want to make it look like it's this, tall mountain to climb. But I shared with him that the best farmers pay insane attention to detail. And basically, until you have that crop, until you touched it and felt it and grown it, the same farmers that knock corn and soybean out of the park are going to knock hemp out of the park. And it's because they're going to get it in the field, they're going to grow it, and they're going to figure out this region's recipe for how you need to grow hemp. And so you really need to figure out a way to entice some of your best farmers to get in the game. And it's going to be through creative insurance strategies and, growth and trials. And we're fortunate NC State is all about, we got probably one of the best programs in the country with Dr. Suchal. He's actually in charge of that collaboration where they're doing hemp research. But attention to detail, your farmers in this region, they obviously have that under their thumb, and we're going to need them to figure out some things with hemp in this region. And thankfully, I'm not going to plug any companies, but there are varieties from different countries that, again, that latitude is everything, that daylight is everything. You guys have access to a lot of different varieties right here in this region. And that's important because they spent the last 30 years breeding and dialing those genetics in to do exactly what they want. For example, Europe has monoecious varieties, which is, we would likely call that a hermaphrodite, but it's the male female. But they did that for a reason, because it's not as vigorous, it's not as tall and showy, and you don't get to take your picture in front of a 15-foot tall plant that nobody knows what to do with. But it's very consistent. It might be 10 foot tall, but the plant is very consistent, like you would see in corn. So it's very similar conversation depending on the use. If you're just going to grind it up and chop it for some use, that's one thing. But when the fiber market emerges, truly emerges, and they need specs, and these companies need 2 millimeter, cut to length fiber, it's going to be important that every plant was as similar as it could have been. And that goes right back to the farmers in the region. Best farmers in the region are going to get every seed to come up. They're going to get it to come up at the same time, and they're going to harvest it exactly when they're supposed to. And those are the type of things that we're going to have.
So,
Sam had a question.
all right, Sam, go ahead.
Just a quick question on, anybody growing hemp hydroponically that you've seen?
For industrial hemp?
Or grain or leaves or?
CBD, indoor growers, which we kind of see more of the soil growers and the indoor installs or the greenhouse growers. Hydroponics is not so much just because of the cost factor of that, but there are some awesome indoor CBD growers in the state of Illinois that we deal with, and you wouldn't know that nug has less than 0.3% THC in it because it looks exactly the same as something that was grown by one of the big cannabis growers here in Illinois. So I would say we've come a long way in a short time frame, and just 5-6 years when 550,000 acres of hemp was grown primarily only for CBD in 2019. A lot of lessons learned, unfortunately, people took some lumps there, but we've all learned from them, and there are some great indoor growers.
Yeah, microgreens. That's the big, easy go-to system right now. I can't say that it's hydroponic or not, but it's like a greenhouse setting. But that's something I'm aware of, that there's a lot of attention being paid to.
Add to that, microgreens, you have to test them for THC right now. So hopefully that will be changed after Illinois' rules are updated to reflect all of the, flexibility that USDA allows.
So as we're coming to conclusion of today's hemp informational series, I do want to pay tribute to one farmer who's in the crowd who was a speaker at one of our last events. You mentioned about farmers' first year and being meticulous. We did have one farmer who happens to be here tonight who did go fairly large for his first R&D year and was meticulous and had a fantastic turnout. and it's Mike Baines who's here in the crowd. But it can be done on your first try with proper guidance and great console. Some of the people you see in front of you have gone through a lot of those trials and tribulations in order to get to this point to where we are today and the knowledge we've acquired over a long span of time. So, you know, I wanted to thank everybody for taking the time out of their busy schedules to spend it with us tonight, and look forward to hosting you at further events in the future. So thank you all so much for coming tonight.
I have one more.
One more question?
Or back to your, if you were to give a perfect seed, row spacing and seed stimulation for grain, what would I know there's some variables there that I'm.
Grain's easier than fiber. So with fiber, we want it as uniform and close together as it can be. And most guys are now 7.5, 10, or 15. And so really like 3.5 is capable in Europe. But you go to grain, it's totally different. You can go right back to like soybeans. So it can be 36, 30, 20, and you get to reduce the population. As Jarett said, you need a little bit more spacing to get a stronger stalk, a stronger root system so it doesn't, blow down.
For grain.
Or grain. So yeah, you can go, 36 is probably a bit far, but I would say 15 inches would be a good consideration. 7.5 would work. It's all going to be about the plant population. You're not necessarily going to go too far above, you say 500,000, 600,000 plants per acre. And then basically, depending on the seed size, we could get the pounds per acre. And then
what's your singulation in row? Say,
man, you can make me do math. That's a tough question. I can tell you, I can do it. Hold on, I can do it. If it were 36, only because I scouted cotton for so many years, I know that 3.5 inches between the plant is roughly 35 ish thousand plants per acre. So you would just multiply that by 15, and so then that would bring it down to quite close. Still quite close.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone online. Appreciate everyone showing up and all the questions. I think it was a great